Hello and welcome to I Know Dino. I'm Garrett.
And I'm Sabrina.
And today in our 470th episode, we have some news, including a new Alvarezsaurid. Those little guys with the claws on their chests is how I always think of them. We also have a review of Netflix Life on Our Planet, featuring some dinosaurs.
Not just a review, we also have some behind-the-scenes info.
Oh! And we have Dinosaur of the Day, Turanoceratops. And of course, we have a fun fact. But before we get into all of that, of course, we'd like to thank some of our patrons for helping to keep our podcast running. This week, we'd like to thank Aaron, Micah Marcos Music, Robert, Ellie Raptor, Eric, Randy and Squim, Ayrton and Everett, Sarasaurus Rex, Polycanthus, and Dang.
Nice. Thank you so much for being a Dino-it-all in our community, and we hope you enjoy this episode and all of our episodes.
We are a little bit low on patrons. I think we're lower than we've been since maybe January, so if you're on the fence about joining, please consider doing so to help us get back up to our previous numbers.
Yeah, will keep us motivated to keep doing those bonus content episodes. Yeah.
We're going to kick it off with a new dinosaur.
Which one?
It's an Alvarezsaurid dinosaur.
Nice. One of the weird ones.
Yes, they are my favorite little chest-clawed weirdos. That's what I think of them as. This new discovery was published in PLOS ONE by Kota Kubo and others. And even though I just called them chest-clawed weirdos, technically they have arms and hands, but they're just so short that when they were alive, you probably would have just seen a couple of claws sticking out of their feathery chests, although they were impressive claws.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not familiar, those arms and claws resemble modern animals that dig for food or break open termite mounds, which is sort of like digging. So maybe that's the same story with Alvarezsaurids, sort of the leading hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
This new dinosaur is named Jaculinykus yarui, and Jaculinykus comes from Jaculus, quote, a tiny dragon from the Greek myth, end quote, plus onychus for claw.
It's a tiny dragon with a claw.
It is. I hadn't heard of the dragon Jaculus before, so I read a little bit about it. And Pliny the Elder wrote about it, as he wrote about so many things. And he said, quote, the Jaculus darts from the branches of trees, and it is not only to our feet that the serpent is formidable, for these fly through the air even, just as though they were hurled from an engine, end quote. Sometimes they're called the javelin snake.
Okay.
Gives you an idea of sort of how they're depicted, just like launching very fast. And in that Pliny the Elder book, he mentions that other people have described them as launching faster than an arrow and that they don't need venom to kill.
Because they're so fast?
Yeah, I guess so. Like a spear, just impaling with their bodies, I guess, or maybe their toe claws. Because interestingly, they're often depicted without arms, which is pretty fitting for an Alvarezsaurid.
That is. It's like the authors knew.
Yeah, I think they probably put some thought into it. And then the species name is yarui, which comes from the Mongolian word yaru. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm pretty sure that's how most English speakers would say it. And that means speedy or hasty. So you could call it a tiny, speedy dragon.
Well, it sounds so cute, except it could do some damage, I'm sure.
Especially if you're an insect, or maybe the small animal that it was digging for. So Jaculinykus is from the Late Cretaceous of Mongolia, and in terms of its age relative to other Alvarezsaurids, it's in a transitional zone between the Nemegt Formation and the Burungoyat Formation, which is pretty late in the Cretaceous. We're in like the 70 million years ago type time range. And in chronological order based on how deep they were buried, they likely go Shavuya, then Parvicursor, then Jaculinykus, and then finally Mononychus as the most recent. They found a nearly complete and partially articulated skeleton of Jaculinykus. I'm not sure if it should be Jaculinykus or Jaculinykus or what. I know how it's pronounced in Greek, but that's very different. Nobody really goes with the full Greek pronunciation for dinosaur names, so it's a little tricky. With this find, they have most of the vertebrae, including the very tip of the tail.
Oh, that's cool. That's rare.
It is, and the tip looks sort of like two narrow vertebrae that fuse together into a long point.
Like a javelin?
You could describe it that way, I guess, if it was like running backwards. But it's actually not that uncommon in dinosaurs. It's sort of like a pygostyle on a modern bird or even our tailbone. A lot of times they kind of come to a point and things start to get fused at the end there. But since we have most of the vertebrae, that means we have a pretty good estimate at its length, which is approximately 75 centimeters or about 2.5 feet. And we also have both of the legs completely preserved as well as the hips. So we can tell that its height was about 45 centimeters or 1.5 feet tall at the top of its head. I'm measuring to there. So you can tell there it's not nearly as elongated as a lot of dinosaurs. It's a little bit taller.
Yeah.
Proportionally. Not even twice as long as it is tall, especially if it's sort of reaching up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those estimates come from their skeletal reconstruction. They didn't put any specific estimates in there, but it seemed pretty reasonable considering they had so many of the bones. The skull, unfortunately, was pretty crushed, but most of it is preserved and it sort of got crushed in place and fossilized there. So it wasn't like a scattering of bones all over the place. They were all sort of in one spot. So that's helpful. And they found 28 quote unquote tiny teeth. Those weren't in the skull, but they were nearby. They range from 1 millimeter to 5 millimeters in length.
Those are tiny.
Yeah, that's extremely small. That's all under a 1/4 inch. And the dinosaur is almost 3 feet long. So you can tell that it wasn't eating anything particularly big.
Mm-hmm.
None of those teeth have serrations, which is similar to Mononychus and Shibuya, although some earlier Alvarezsaurids did have serrations on their teeth, so it might be showing a change in diet over time. It also has a well-preserved hand where you can clearly see its 2 fingers per hand, not 2 fingers total.
Although at first glance, or if you were to see it in life, it might have only looked like it had 2 fingers total.
Yes. Yeah, because the second finger is really tiny compared to that huge first finger. And one thing I thought that was really funny is that it sort of holds its second finger way out to the side. The first one's so big that it sort of pushes the second finger out to the side. So I think it looks kind of like a fancy boy at a tea party.
Oh, like if you had a pinky out?
Yeah.
Not just boys.
That's very true. Yeah. Any fancy person or dinosaur. Maybe it ate its termites fancy. Or it could have been like that one lemur that has the really skinny finger for like poking into stuff to get bugs out. They did not mention that. That's just random speculation. Its closest relatives are Mononychus and Shibuya. Shibuya has 3 fingers, so Jaculinykus appears to be further down the transition to no fingers, although evolution, of course, is more complicated than a simple linear path. It could be in this case, we just don't know yet. And then Mononychus probably basically had 1 finger, but we don't have as good of a hand. So they didn't use it in the comparison.
Don't have as good of a handle on that one.
Yeah. But another interesting side to the story is that it looks kind of like it was fossilized while it was sleeping. That's because its position looks similar to a bird, or maybe more relevantly, Meilong, the sleeping dragon.
More dragon references. Because this is a tiny dragon.
Oh, true.
And
yes.
It looks like the sleeping dragon.
Yeah. So Meilong is a troodontid with longer, possibly feathered arms. And it's not too surprising that Meilong might have used that nice feathered arm like a blanket or a pillow when it was sleeping. That's sort of what birds do today. They sort of curl up their head back over their wing usually. Sometimes I've seen them sort of tuck under the wing a little bit, maybe depending on the weather. Obviously, Alvarezsaurids with their tiny arms, which ended in big claws, would not have been nearly as cozy, but Jaculinykus had another trick. What it did was it, again, folded as much into a ball as it could, just like birds and some other animals do. They have their legs folded to their sides, they have the tail curled under its body, and then they have the head curved back by its foot. And in the paleo art, what they did is they depicted it with a fluffy tail under its head, because we can tell from the way it fossilized that it looks like it was resting its head on top of its tail. We don't know for sure that it was fluffy, but it's possible. And so I just think that's clever that rather than having its head resting on a fluffy wing, it's resting on a fluffy tail.
A tail pillow.
Yeah, it's very cute. And they gave it a couple little feathers on its head too, just like for some character. Melong is also a much closer relative to modern birds than Jaculinykus, which means that this bird-like sleeping posture would have been shared potentially with earlier ancestors than the closest relatives of birds. So it might have been a more common trait among these dinosaurs. And it's also in pretty stark contrast to that opisthotic death pose where the head gets stretched all the way back towards the hips in profile view, like the tail curled up almost like they're curving into a circle. It looks like their neck and tail are really uncomfortable and their toes are clenched and stuff we were talking about recently. This is like the exact opposite. It's just like a sleepy, cozy little ball of dinosaur.
That sounds adorable. And we'll be talking about Netflix's Life on Our Planet in a moment, but first, a quick break for our sponsors. And now onto Netflix Life on Our Planet, which it came out a few weeks ago, but it took us a little while until we had a chance to watch it. And we also were able to get access to some press notes, so we got some scoop on some of the scenes in the show. So that was pretty cool.
And by we, Sabrina means she did. Because I kind of watched it and didn't read any of these press things, so I'm excited to hear about it.
Well, the log line is, this is the story of life's epic 4 billion year journey on Earth, told through its ruling dynasties, the underdogs who defied the odds to survive, and the cataclysmic events that reshaped it. This is the story of life on our planet.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. Now, if this sounds like a really big project, it's because it was. According to the press notes, the producers had just finished the first season of Our Planet, and they were thinking about what to do for their next big series. And they were inspired by David Attenborough's Life on Earth from 1979, when the producers were university students. They said they wanted a challenge, and they got it because this spans 4 billion years. It goes through all 5 mass extinction events, and it talks about the 6th mass extinction that we're currently living through. They started working on the series in late 2018.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning, because there are some similarities between Life on Our Planet and Prehistoric Planet. And we thought, oh no, did Life on Our Planet just watch Prehistoric Planet and say like, well, we're going to do something similar? But apparently not, because they've been working on it for so long. And some of these scenes were already in the making before Prehistoric Planet even started.
Yes.
Or maybe not before it started, but definitely before it was released.
I wouldn't say we thought, but yes.
I thought that. Especially there was like a mating display and I was like, oh, this is familiar.
It's just people having similar ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's very pretty, the show. It does jump around a bit. The dinosaurs appear, for example, in episodes 1, 4, 5, and 6. There's, I think, a total of 8 episodes. We'll be focusing on just the dinosaurs for this series. Maybe you would have guessed that.
Mm-hmm.
But first, some fun stats that we came across. The team spent 1,781 days in the field across 45 countries to make this.
That is a lot of days.
Yes.
I don't know what that is in years, but 5-ish?
Maybe they said it was 6 years in the making. There were 868 final VFX shots, 500 featured species, 165 scientists consulted across the show, which makes sense because they're covering so many types of animals.
Yeah.
There were 65 VFX creatures that they created, so the dinosaurs, the prehistoric ones.
Okay, that makes more sense, because when you said 500 species, I was like, wow, that is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
But if 435 of them are things you can film, it's a little bit easier to get to 500.
Yes. They also had about 2,181 hours of footage. Can't imagine going through all that footage. According to the press notes, each episode is about 30 to 40% CGI, and then the rest is filmed. So they've integrated natural history with CGI. And when they were shooting landscapes and chase scenes, for example, they angled the camera in a way as if they were filming a real prehistoric animal. And that's a technique that we heard about they used on Prehistoric Planet as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that idea of like, how would a camera crew approach this if it was a real situation so that it's not just like at the eye level of a T-Rex, because a camera crew isn't going to be at the eye level of a T-Rex. Although that's often what you see in some documentaries. It just depends on what style they're going for.
For this natural history style, that seems to be the way to go. So for these 65 CGI animals, each one had a fact file for the studio to make them as accurate as possible in VFX, and each fact file was about 60 pages.
Oh, wow.
So they did their research. Like Prehistoric Planet, they also used fossils for some of the music. In the press notes, it said that one was a 3D printed replica of a Neanderthal bone flute. The original was carved of cave bear bone from about 55,000 years ago.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not just a prehistoric piece of fossilized something or something shaped like a prehistoric animal. This is a recreation of an actual instrument
that Neanderthals used.
Yeah, I guess you could say it's prehistoric.
Yeah. All right, well, on to the dinosaurs. So, of course, there is T-Rex and Triceratops, because how can you not? And they first make an appearance in episode 1. For Triceratops, it's breeding season coming up, so they are eating a lot of food. And then a T-Rex and 2 youngsters come in, and just worth noting that all the Tyrannosaurs have lips. That seems to be the new style.
Yep.
The mother T-Rex they've made more colorful and reddish, and the 3 of them together do an ambush attack on the Triceratops. In the press notes, they talk about how fossil tracks suggest that Tyrannosaurs ambushed prey. The baby Tyrannosaurus are faster. They work as a team, and they start by biting the Triceratops' tail. But the Triceratops makes it back to its herd, and the T-Rex goes away because it's just too risky. So that tracks with the research, because scientists currently think that Tyrannosaurus in particular had, it was faster and just would have gone after prey in a different way from an adult Tyrannosaurus.
Oh, the juveniles were faster? Yeah. Yeah, and I think in that case, they were maybe implying that the juveniles were helping the adult, like they were going to come in later, but then the Triceratops had their sort of wall of frills and spikes pointed at them.
Yeah.
Made a little bit of an impenetrable force, even for an adult T-Rex.
What was also interesting, because the adult T-Rex knew when it was time to give up, but the juvenile ones took a little longer.
I remember talking about that one time with dinosaurs and like, would this kind of dinosaur attack this kind of dinosaur? And the answer 9 times out of 10 is no. But juveniles that haven't learned everything about how to hunt and might be full of hormones or who knows what, sometimes make silly mistakes.
Yeah.
Or go after overly ambitious prey.
Their eyes are bigger than their bite? I don't know.
Yep.
So according to the press notes, they filmed this sequence on military land in the UK so that the crew could drive at high speeds to simulate the chase. But they said, quote, however, it meant that ILM then had to transform what amounted to a parking lot into a beautiful meadow.
Oh, jeez.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
We see Tyrannosaurus Rex again in episode 5. As Morgan Freeman said, it's the, quote, one iconic animal that ruled over them all.
I guess. It ruled over a lot of large animals, for sure.
Oh, I guess the smaller animals didn't notice.
Didn't really rule over the mammals. They were just in a totally separate world.
They were in their underground world.
Yeah.
Partly because of Tyrannosaurus.
Also, you've got the stuff in the water.
I see. Anyway. They show T-Rex stomping through the forest and roaring. It's got the same colors with those reddish colors. So that shows it's an adult. I remember, Gary, you said that the aerial shot was cool. You liked in particular.
Oh, yeah. Was it like a top-down view of a T-Rex running or stomping? Maybe chasing?
Yeah. And it's building up this tension, and it ends up doing a mating dance with some tail wagging.
Yeah, that was the scene that reminded us immediately of the Carnotaurus doing their little arm wiggle as a mating dance, because in that one too, it was like, are they going to fight? And then it's like, oh no, it's a mating dance. And I think obviously this is something that happens in the animal kingdom a lot, where sometimes animals will sort of size each other up. And from our perspective, we can't tell why they're sizing each other up. But from their perspective, they probably knew that it was going to be a mating display the whole time. Whereas to us, we're like, what's going to happen? What is going on here?
Which way is this going to go?
Yeah.
Well, the goal of the scene was to show the T-Rex's softer side with the mating display. They said that they started planning this sequence in early 2019, and they based the dance on modern relatives. And they also relied on that study of tyrannosaur skulls having lots of nerve endings on the snouts, so nuzzling may have been involved when trying to attract mates. That's the one about the Displetosaurus.
Yeah, I remember that.
They also said that they gave the male T-Rex quill-like feathers down the neck. This is after going through a lot of research and debates on whether Tyrannosaurus had feathers, and if so, what did it look like, and how dense were these feathers? They said, quote, "At first we put on so many feathers that it gave the greatest predator of all time a mullet. He looked like a Metallica fan. But once we dialed them back, we got to that sweet spot. While we felt that this was the widely held view, there will inevitably be people who disagree," end quote. I would have liked to see a Tyrannosaurus with a mullet.
Yeah, I think I've seen, I want to say at the LA Natural History Museum, the puppet that they have that you can wear, that they were walking around when we were there.
Very feathery.
Maybe in 2016 or something. Yeah, I want to say it had like brown feathers that sort of started on the top of its head and came down kind of like a mane, and it gave it sort of a mullety look.
Yeah.
I actually personally think the scariest looking T-Rex, some of the scariest looking T-Rex art I've seen are when they're like fully feathered like a crow or a raven. So they have like black scales and like big black feathers and stuff. And because it just makes them look even bigger and more imposing and intimidating and everything.
Oh, that's true.
And you get that effect with like the bright eye, sort of like the Indoraptor in Jurassic World or something, where it just has this like really menacing look to it. But I haven't seen that really done in any of these documentaries. I mean, I think it's also probably kind of unrealistic that such a huge animal wouldn't have some more coloring going on than just solid, a single color. But
yeah. I do like how they made their Tyrannosaurus look.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously they're going for accuracy, so they don't care what I think looks cool, which is the way it should be. They should be going for what they think is the most realistic.
Yeah. And then when it came to how Tyrannosaurus and the other animals in the series behaved, they based it on fossil footprints and other trace fossils and comparing those trace fossils to modern close relatives. We don't see Triceratops again until episode 6, and it's after the asteroid hits Earth, so poor Triceratops. Like, we see the impact and the effect on the dinos, the earth shaking, the tsunami that gets the sauropods.
Oh, yeah.
The rock debris raining down on baby lambeosaurs. There's a mother lambeosaur sitting on a nest trying to protect the nest, which is so sad. And then, of course, there's the fires, and we see Triceratops running from flames, and Morgan Freeman so solemnly says, "Nothing can save them now."
Yep.
The asteroid impact makes an appearance in several episodes, too. It's kind of like a teaser of what's to come in episode 1. And they show this dust cloud covering the Earth.
That was one thing about the show that was a little confusing to me, because they jumped around in time a lot. And the people we were watching it with at one point said, like, what happened? I didn't realize dinosaurs were around after the asteroid, because like you said, they show the asteroid and then they sort of jump backwards in time and then they go forwards in time. And so, yeah, it was a little tricky. But they definitely made the most out of that asteroid impact animation, which was really impressive. Yeah,
well, in the press notes, they said that they tried to make it chronological, the whole series, but maybe it was because they're highlighting these extinction events too, and what that means for life on Earth, so it makes sense to go back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was mostly chronological by episode, but not just within the episode.
I see.
Although obviously not all the time, because you said the asteroid impact was in multiple episodes.
According to the press notes, too, they used a lot of props and set dressing rather than VFX to show the Earth after the impact. Like they had burnt trees. They said it was, quote, easier said than done in Iceland, where there are seldom few trees, end quote. But they had real burnt trees instead of VFX burnt trees. And they also had a half-sized Triceratops head that they made this burned, desiccated, mummified version. They also filmed all over the world for the sequence showing the dinosaurs dying.
I wonder what they ended up doing with that half-sized Triceratops head that's all mutilated.
Maybe they'll use it for a future project.
Yeah, or it's just like in someone's living room now.
Well, back to the dinosaurs. We see Plateosaurus hatching in episode 4, and it's very cute. Plateosaurus, right off the bat, can fend for itself, can walk upright, run on 2 legs as well as stand on all 4s. And as they're hatching, they're talking about them ushering in the dinosaur age.
Yeah, Plateosaurus is a pretty good example of that because they're sort of unusual looking and they kind of have a combination of features that you see in different dinosaur groups later.
They also have the more efficient breathing system where they're continually pumping oxygen. Now, according to the press notes, they filmed this during the pandemic in the UK, quote, in a mossy patch of coniferous forest in the Lake District, end quote. They had this 8-person filming team, but they had to wait 12 days for the rain to stop. And then it stopped raining on day 13, but only for 2 hours. And there were these large storm clouds in the air. So I think it was a bit tricky. They had dozens of people help design the Plateosaurus. The fact file for that one was 55 pages. And they had information on like the skeletons, the muscles, teeth, its tongue, the size, shape, color, how it walked, texture, mannerisms, and speed. And the sequence, they said, has a nod to Jurassic Park when the camera tilts up to unveil the adult. So some subtle Easter eggs in there. Also, in the press notes, they said that, quote, if you could bring one animal back to life as a pet, Plateosaurus would be it, end quote, even though it grew so large. It is pretty cute when it hatches.
Yeah. And also, they're herbivorous, or at least we think they were herbivorous, mostly herbivorous, which is a useful thing for a pet. And they're sort of like, I guess they're like Dino, right?
In the Flintstones?
Yeah. Even though, did you tell me Dino was supposed to be some kind of hadrosaur?
I think so.
But really, to me, it looks more Plateosaurus-like because it's sort of quadrupedal and it's got like a medium-length neck.
Except Dino barks like a dog.
Yeah. Well, it's Hanna-Barbera. What are you going to do?
So after Plateosaurus, we see sauropods drinking water. I think it's Diplodocus. And then Allosaurus runs after with the clapper hands. So that's good.
The hands are in the right position.
Yep, clapping, not slapping. And Diplodocus comes back in episode 5 when we're in the Jurassic in North America. And there's a cool angle where you see one walking towards you.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw something like that, I think was in Walking with Dinosaurs, or maybe one of the spin-offs of it, where you see like the head on and you really see how wide they are and sort of, they look funny.
Yeah.
When they're walking and you see them head on.
They look pretty cute.
That's one way to put it.
Well, sauropods. It's near and dear to my heart. Then there's Allosaurus, and it's covered in armor. It's walking towards those herd of dippies. That's just how I see it in my mind. They're not just Diplodocus, they're dippies. The Allosaurus gets hit in the face by a tail, so it goes after easier prey, which means a baby Diplodocus that hatched from an egg no bigger than a grapefruit. Although that seems like a large egg to me.
Yeah. Large for compared to modern animal eggs, but small compared to how big a Diplodocus is.
So this baby Diplodocus has to fend for herself. She's too small to live in the herd because she might get trampled, which I thought was an interesting explanation.
That they even trample their own young, not just turtles.
I knew you were going to turn this around on me. Bringing in the turtles.
I liked another depiction where they basically all hid in the forest until they grew up to a larger size.
Yeah, so the babies are in their own herd together. To stay safe from the Allosaurus, though, because the Allosaurus is trying to find the baby, because that's the easier snack, she stays as still as possible. And the Allosaurus is towering over. There's a storm going on, or it's about to start, and they say the storm is masking clues to her location in terms of, hearing or seeing or smelling. So eventually the Allosaurus moves away and the baby lives. Yay! Now, according to the press notes, the thinking behind this baby hiding is that it's similar to the hiding posture that some antelope do in the Serengeti today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, to me, that whole description is like, what else would it do?
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that it's based on an actual animal.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize that antelope did that. They had a lot of work on this scene to make it look like nighttime, plus adding the dinosaurs and all the vegetation and the rain and lightning. So a lot of details went into that particular sequence.
It reminds me of those composition things you see on VFX where they're layering in the different effects on top of one another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, here's the background, then we put the dinosaur on it, then we put the rain, then we add some lightning, then we add some like fog and
Yeah.
some
Yeah, but then you also have to think of the dinosaur. It's like, here's the skeleton. Now we add the muscles. Now we add the skin.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Then the shading. Lots of steps. But speaking of herds, there's a herd of Maiasaura, this is back in episode 1, where they feed their babies like baby birds or penguins, where they put the food right in their mouths.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that scene.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because Maiasaura aren't really related to birds very much at all. I mean, they're technically dinosaurs and birds are dinosaurs, but I mean, they're ornithischians, so they're like way far different evolutionarily speaking than birds. But all you need in order to feed a baby like that is a crop, which is a pretty simple structure, basically. It's sort of a little side pouch in the top of the digestive tract. So you could imagine an animal doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea.
I suppose it's also preferable to showing the babies eating the poop, which is the other really likely way to do it.
Oh, yes.
But that might not sell as well.
Well, it might also be, there's only so much that we know.
Yeah.
So you get a little bit of artistic license here. And then we see the herd of Maiasaura again briefly in episode 5 while they're migrating. Speaking of only so much that we know, there's a pack hunting scene. In episode 5, we see a baby fuzzy Deinonychus with a quote-unquote endearing appearance. I agree. It was cute. Then Arghensaurus gets hunted by a pack of 3 Deinonychus, which we don't see Arghensaurus too much.
No, yeah. I wonder if one of their consultants was like a fan of Arghensaurus and argued for it to get included.
Yeah, or maybe studied it or something. Yeah.
Arghensaurus is pretty big too, so it has that going for it.
Yeah.
And like you said, if they want Deinonychus, you have to pick something that was around at the same time as it, if you're trying to be as realistic as possible.
I like the feathers that they gave on both types of dinosaurs and the colors. Like Arghensaurus has some purple around the eyes. There's another cool aerial shot where you can see the hand posture or placement. Oh,
yeah, I like that. Yeah, because we should mention too, Arghensaurus is an ornithomimid, like Ornithomimus or Gallimimus, Struthiamimus. So sort of ostrichy, but with a long tail.
Yeah.
And when you see them running from above, you see just how different they are. Because I'm used to, when you look at them from the side, you're like, okay, it's got a long tail. But when you see them from above and you see the hands out and everything, it looks so much different than just a larger ostrich.
Yeah. So the way that they do this pack hunting, Deinonychus, is that they chase Arghensaurus to exhaustion, which makes sense. That's how a lot of hunts go, I think.
Yeah, some. It depends on the animal, how they hunt.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, bipedal animals tend to run more efficiently, so it's harder to exhaust a bipedal animal. But I guess in this case, they're both bipedal.
Yeah.
So they're sort of on even footing that way.
And it's 3-on-1. Oh, but going back to your ostrich comment, yeah, they said they described Arghensaurus as a kind of dinosaur ostrich on steroids. And then, of course, there's the birds. Those are the last dinosaurs. In episode 6, they talk about how the feathers kept birds warm and they're precocial. They can take care of themselves after hatching. They can eat insects and seeds and walk within hours of being born, and that all helped them after the asteroid hit.
Some birds can. Not all birds are so capable.
Right.
But yeah, it is likely that the ones that survived the asteroid, some of the ones that were most resilient.
Yeah. There were a lot of birds throughout the series, but I just wanted to highlight a few, starting with Anchiornis in the Jurassic in episode 6. It's really cute. It's got speckles on its wings and orange on top of its head with bluish feathers. And we do know from fossils that, and like melanosomes and everything, that the pattern with the black and white feathers and the orange-red crest on its head is accurate.
Yeah, they did this. I immediately recognized it as Anchiornis because they did use that exact same basically coloration pattern that was proposed in a peer-reviewed article. Although I will say the white part of it is the least certain because with the black part, you see these melanosomes and they presume that they're the type of melanosome that creates the black color. The same thing with the red coloration, and the white was sort of like, well, we don't see much here. Maybe it was white colored.
But I think that's the general consensus as of now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only peer-reviewed color reconstruction I've seen. So obviously, if you're going for the state of the science, that's what you go with. So it is good that they picked that.
And Anchiornis is getting hunted by Signraptor, which corners Anchiornis on top of a cliff. And if you didn't know anything about Anchiornis, you might think, uh-oh, that's the end for this dinosaur. But Anchiornis jumps off the cliff and starts gliding because it's got the 4 wings.
Yeah, as I was watching it, I could tell that's where they were going with it, and I could see its wings, but I know that it has wings, so I don't know, like, did people not know that was coming? I guess they probably didn't, because otherwise the whole thing wouldn't have worked. But to me, it was like, okay, you've got basically a bird walking to the edge of a cliff. It's obviously about to jump off at any moment.
I mean, it's hard to say because we've been doing this for almost 9 years.
Yeah.
But 9 years ago, we wouldn't have known.
Yeah, that's true. I guess we wouldn't have. I didn't even consider the fact that like people were watching this and didn't know it could jump off. I'm too embedded.
I did enjoy the scene. In the press notes, they said they featured Anchiornis because it's one of the first dinosaurs to take to the sky, as they put it, quote, fall with style. I like that. And it's a, quote, game-changing moment because ultimately this leap of faith has resulted in the dynasty of the birds, end quote.
This is true, although whether or not Anchiornis was the actual ancestor, we're not so sure. I think falling with style might be a Toy Story reference.
Oh, yeah?
That's what Buzz Lightyear says with his wing suit thing.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Although it wasn't falling with as much style as Buzz Lightyear because their wings were really flapping in the breeze.
And then I liked how there were a bunch of them. They were kind of coming from various corners.
Yeah.
And meeting up with each other a little bit.
I remember when we talked to, I think it was Michael Habib, about the dragons in Game of Thrones. And he was saying the animators wanted to make the wings kind of flappy. And he talked them out of it because people watching it, some of them would know if they were flapping in the breeze like that, they wouldn't be generating really any lift because it's sort of like a broken wing at that point, like a sail flapping in the breeze. So he convinced them to do other stuff like show the hair on the people on the back, flying back to show the speed. But I guess maybe they didn't have as much to work with the Anchiornis, so they ended up going back to that flappy wing look.
I wonder if the flappy wing is to kind of slow it down because it's just, getting lower and lower.
It could also be that they were trying to make it look like it wasn't that good of a flyer because they did make some comments about well, it definitely couldn't fly, but it could glide a little bit. And that was still plenty for what it needed to do.
Just showing the very early days of flight.
Yeah, because we don't know how tight they could hold their wings and exactly what they'd look like as they were falling.
Yeah.
With style.
I also want to mention the terror birds. We see them first in episode 1 fighting over territory, and I liked how they made the feathers on the back of its head stand up.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved the terror bird recreations in there.
And then Smilodon attacks. And this could all be because we recently did some episodes on terror birds and Smilodon, so it's like, oh yeah, I know a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think it is sort of a representation of Smilodon replacing terror birds more than it being all the terror birds went extinct because Smilodon ate all of them, because we think they probably more competed with each other than actually physically attacked each other all the time. I could see why for the spectacle they went for a more direct attack.
Yeah. I'm sure it happened sometimes too.
Probably. Yeah. I do think there was a case of, I'm trying to remember what all is in the fossil record of, animals that have holes. Actually, it might be a terror bird that attacked another terror bird, not a smilodon that attacked a terror bird.
Oh, yeah. But it does seem like something that could have happened.
Yes.
And then we next see the terror birds in episode 6. One kills some prey, a Theosodon, which is a mammal that looks somewhat like a llama, after it chases it down, and then it uses that hatchet head method that we've talked about. Oh my gosh, it's so intense.
Yeah, basically using the weight of its entire head and then that curved spiked beak from the top, the rostrum, almost like a huge overbite, but with the spike sticking down. I guess it's also kind of like a saber-toothed cat in that way, using that whole head and that spike to like get at its prey.
Yeah. And as I was watching that, I was thinking about how, I think it was Allosaurus. There was another hypothesis that Allosaurus used the hatchet kind of method.
I think that's mostly not thought anymore, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is back in the day, because that would have been intense. Well, anyway, the terror bird, yeah, we both liked it. It's menacing. It's feathered, of course. According to the press release, the scene where it's killing the prey was filmed in Morocco. And the crew got there one day after COVID lockdown, which kind of worked out because they filmed in a city with this historic palm forest that's normally full of tourists and traffic, but then it was empty.
So they didn't need the people there for crowd control.
Exactly. Because when you're filming prehistoric animals, you don't want a whole bunch of people in your shots.
No hominids.
Yeah.
Although I guess hominids were around, just not humans. Not Homo sapiens.
Certainly not modern humans walking around.
Fully clothed.
Yeah. with
cameras.
Technology. Yeah.
Wandering into a shot. That would be really funny, actually. Like how that, again, Game of Thrones episode, wasn't there like a Starbucks cup that got left on set one time?
Yeah. We didn't notice, but other people noticed.
Yeah. That would be funny if one of the like terror bird scenes or something, there's just like a dude strolling through the back, like, or just in the corner of the shot, taking pictures.
You see a little smartphone taking a picture. Anyway, last, I just love these scenes, like the parading flamingos in episode 6, where they're talking about powered flight and flapping wings, and then they do their wonderful, wonderful parade.
Yes.
Which I loved so much. That was the inspiration for our art one year. We did the Parasaurolophus parade.
Yes.
And that's why I made them all pink.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah, I could rewatch that scene so much. So yeah, those are the dinosaurs and a recap and a little bit behind the scenes look at Netflix's Life on Our Planet.
It's so hard not to compare it to Prehistoric Planet because they came out close in time, but they really are quite different because Prehistoric Planet was a little bit more speculative in some ways. They had a little more fun with it. Like they had the sauropods with the big like air bubble necks. They had the Carnotaurus with its little arms and stuff like that. Whereas in Life on Our Planet, they went more conservative with it. Like they made Anchiornis and they used the peer-reviewed recreation art of it. So it really is different. And then they also obviously have all the modern animals as well.
Right. I'd say they still had fun with it though, because yeah, there's these moments between the animals.
Yeah.
Throughout the series. Yeah.
I'm just saying it was a little less speculative.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say both series are very pretty though. And I mean, I just like seeing dinosaurs.
Yeah, me too. My favorites were the most bird-like ones. Well, specifically, I really like the Arkansaurus and I really like the terror birds. Both of those, maybe because I haven't seen them really created elsewhere, it was really cool to see, a huge, high-budget team put all their resources into recreating a really beautiful terror bird and a really beautiful large ornithomimosaur.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciated that part.
I wonder what they'll end up doing next. It sounds like this particular team likes taking on giant projects.
They might do something in the water. It seems like a lot of those projects, like there's Planet Earth and then they do like Blue Planet. A lot of times it's like,
oh, they did do
land and then water.
They did do water.
But did they do prehistoric water? Oh, really?
Yeah, but we just focused on the dinosaurs, so.
Oh, I just totally missed all that.
So yeah, we'll see. But I definitely enjoyed watching the series. And we'll get on to our dinosaur of the day in a moment, but first we'll take a quick break for our sponsors. And now on to our dinosaur of the day, Turanoceratops, which was a request from Thieving Raptor Lorenzo via our Patreon and Discord, so thanks. Turanoceratops was a ceratopsian that lived in the Late Cretaceous in what is now Uzbekistan. It was found in the Bissekty Formation. It was small with a short frill and 2 long horns on its brow, a beak, a longish tail, and it walked on all fours. It didn't have a nasal horn. Like I said, it was relatively small, so it was estimated to be about 6.5 feet or 2 meters long and weigh 385 pounds or 175 kilograms.
That is certifiably tiny for
For a ceratopsian,
yeah.
especially in the Late Cretaceous. It probably ate ferns and conifers, and it would have used its beak to bite off leaves and needles. Now, it was a ceratopsian, but it was not a ceratopsid. That's the group that includes the subfamilies, the chasmosaurines and the centrosaurines, and it includes dinosaurs like Triceratops. But rather, it was more transitional between earlier ceratopsians and ceratopsids.
Oh, okay. That could help explain a smaller size, because most of the big ones are ceratopsids.
Mm-hmm. Compared to larger ceratopsids, Tyrannoceratops only had 2 or 3 teeth in each vertical dental file instead of 4 or 5, but it did have double-rooted teeth, and it did have also long brow horns. Tyrannoceratops, though, was found to be more advanced than Zuniceratops, which is the earliest known horned dinosaur in North America. It did look similar to Zuniceratops.
As you mentioned that, I just realized that Zuniceratops is a lot smaller than I'd always thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've never actually seen it in person, I don't think.
Well, no one has.
Oh, I mean, the skeleton.
Yeah. Yeah, if you just look at paleo art, it's hard to tell how big the animal was.
Yeah, you can get totally lost in the sense of scale.
Tyrannoceratops, there were fragmentary fossils found starting in the 1920s, and scientists thought that there was some sort of ceratopsid in the area. Then Lev Nesov published the name Tyrannoceratops tartabilis in 1988, but didn't describe the dinosaur, so it was a nomen nudum for a while. Then it was officially named in 1989 by Nesov and others. So the type species is Tyrannoceratops tartabilis. The genus name means Turan horned face, and Turan is an old Persian name for Turkestan. The species name means slowing, and it refers to the research taking a long time to name the dinosaur.
That's funny.
The holotype is a damaged left upper jawbone. It was broken into 2 tightly fitting pieces. Other fossils found include the brow horn cores, parts of the limbs and feet, teeth, part of the lower jaw, and part of the skull. And there were other fossils referred to Tyrannoceratops, but it turned out to belong to other dinosaurs. One was a brain case, but that ended up being part of a sauropod's brain case.
There aren't skulls that are much more different than a ceratopsian and a sauropod.
Yeah. But if you only have fragments, sometimes it's hard to tell.
Yeah, the brain case is basically just like this flat little top piece of the skull, so I could see that.
Yeah. Another was what was thought to be part of the frill, but that turned out to be armor from an ankylosaur. Some paleontologists considered Tyrannoceratops to be a nomen dubium, but Hans Sues in 2009 said that it was valid, and we're sticking with it. Other dinosaurs that lived around the same time and place included the ankylosaur Bissekty, theropods such as Caenanesia, the Alvarezsaurid Jaculinykus, the dromaeosaur Idamirus, the Tyrannosauroid Timurlengia, as well as sauropods and antiornithines. And other animals that lived around the same time and place included turtles, mollusks, fish, plesiosaurs, mammals, pterosaurs, lizards, crocodilomorphs, and amphibians. And our fun fact is that collages can make good paleo art, so maybe there's hope for me.
Like collage is not necessarily that you make from scratch.
Yeah, you can use photographs, for example, and then put them together in different elements in different ways. which is kind of what happened earlier this year in the Anatomical Record. They released this special issue, Dinosaurs, New Ideas from Old Bones, that honored paleontologist Peter Dodson. And they published some commentary on how they made the cover art for that, and that depicts the ceratopsian Pachyrhinosaurus and the theropod Nanuqsaurus in the Arctic. We talk about paleo art a fair amount on this show, and it brings together a lot of disciplines, like you have to know anatomy and ecology, and of course art, and in many cases digital skills. So for this cover, it's a really cool cover. The Pachyrhinosaurus is looking at the camera, and then Nanuqsaurus is even more in the foreground, looking menacing, and you mostly see its head. And they're just they're existing together. And behind them is the Aurora, though there are also some dinosaurs fighting in the background. The challenge, they said, for this cover was that they wanted to depict these dinosaurs in a new and interesting way that's still scientifically accurate. So how do you make them stand out from previous depictions? Because a lot of them show Nanuqsaurus attacking Pachyrhinosaurus in a snowstorm. So they wanted to avoid that cliche. They also, quote, wanted to avoid a woolly depiction of Nanuqsaurus given the lack of evidence that this taxon or any other large tyrannosaurid was thickly covered in feathers, and to depict a warmer scene given that the Arctic was substantially warmer year-round and more seasonal than it is today, end quote. So they did include plants in the cover art, like ferns and trees that have been found in the Prince Creek Formation in Alaska. Pachyrhinosaurus is pretty well known. It's this heavy-set ceratopsian with the small conical horns on its frill and a large nasal boss, which is similar to what's under the boss of horns of musk oxen, apparently. They also show it with a lot of scales, because a lot of scaly skin impressions have been found. But Nanuqsaurus isn't as well known. We know that it's relatively small, and we mostly know it from its skull, so that's why they have the profile of it in the foreground, so you only see the head, really. And it's also not clear if Nanuqsaurus had feathers, so they didn't include feathers for this art.
Also, if you're just showing the head, sometimes they may have had featherless heads even if they had feathers on other parts of their body, like how some birds are today.
Yeah, that's true. When it came to reconstructing the dinosaurs, they got a lot of textures from birds and reptiles, and they referenced mammal horns for the Pachyrhinosaurus frill horns and nose horns. The frill horn is based on Cape buffaloes and the nose horn from a muskox. For the fighting dinosaurs in the background, they referenced some fighting birds and lizards. And they said, quote, there are some particularly dramatic records of Komodo dragons fighting. Makes sense. They licensed a lot of stock images to create elements like the background and the sky. For example, it's composed of 4 images and foliage, and then they blended them together. And that's kind of what I mean by collage, although maybe that's not technically the right term here. But it's like using existing things to make new art.
Gotcha. So, but they still did have to actually make the animals.
They did. It still requires a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge.
But some of it you can put together, maybe the scenery and things with collage type strategies.
Well, for the dinosaurs, they used 6 photos for the Nanuqsaurus head and a dozen lizard photos to make the head of Pachyrhinosaurus, plus the 3 mammal horn images and the 4 photos of lizards. So it's like using different elements to maybe in a lot of the case, it was like texture kind of things.
Okay, I see. That's cool. So they might have had to draw the horns and like a couple other details, but for like all that intricate detail work, they could sort of collage that on as well.
Yeah.
It's probably a better term for this, but I get what you mean.
There is, but I'm not an artist, so I don't know all the art terms. They also used images of ostriches for the toes. And then they put everything together in Photoshop. There's 100+ layers, and then added shading and highlighting.
I'm sure people on our Discord server and our arts channel are going to be telling us what the correct terminology is after this episode.
Yes. Well, please let me know. I'd like to know. For the cover, they said they wanted the image to be both tense and serene. There's not much evidence of pathologies of Pachyrhinosaurus, so it may have had a pretty calm lifestyle. Seems reasonable. And they also wanted to show an appreciation for nature and how things can easily flip between being calm and then being more exciting. So that's partly why you have the Nanuqsaurus up front, looking a little bit menacing.
Maybe this is about to take a turn.
Yeah.
Like all the craziness going on in the background, apparently.
Yeah. But, in a way, the way that they made this cover art is similar to life on our planet. You take the science that you know, and then you speculate on what you don't know, and
mix in some modern living animals.
Yeah.
It's true.
And then you come up with something beautiful. That wraps up this episode of I Know Dino. Thank you for listening. If you want even more dinosaur goodness, then head over to our show notes at iknowdino.com. We have links to all our sources. Stay tuned next week. We'll be catching up and talking about a bunch of new dinosaurs. Thanks again, and until next time.